set against the backdrop of the Holodomor famines in Soviet Ukraine during the 1930s. The movie delves into the chilling legends and paranormal entities associated with this dark period in history. The story revolves around Jenny, a brave investigative journalist joined by her boyfriend Ryan and their friend Ethan in a documentary project in Kiev. Their objective is to collect first-hand accounts of the cannibalistic tales and supernatural events that plagued the region during the famines for their documentary entitled Cannibals of the 20th Century, which is focused on a local cannibal named Boris Glaskov, the alleged perpetrator. They dubbed their documentary A Cannibal Confession. Equipped with their cameras and a relentless desire to uncover the truth, the crew embark on a journey to explore the darkest corners of this haunting past. Upon their arrival in Kiev, the crew are greeted by locals named Valerie and Katerina. Valerie is responsible for their transport, while Katerina will serve as their translator. After settling the initial transport fee, Valerie takes them to the village where the cannibalistic accounts came from. With their cameras and other filming equipment, the crew immerse themselves in the local culture and begin conducting interviews with survivors of the Holodomor famines. According to some of the locals, people were eaten in a nearby tunnel inside the village. After the war, people sold cutlets to survive. One victim of the famine even took the feed more survivors. After gathering some of the useful accounts for their documentary, the crew start to focus on their main subject, Boris. They proceed to the Ukrainian National Library to interview Professor Antonov, one of the people responsible for Boris's confession to the murders. With Boris's consent, Antonov has him under psychosis, where he is revealed to have committed cannibalism. However, a mysterious and interesting fact about his case is that Boris blames everything on supernatural forces. The crew then proceed to interview Boris's employer for 15 years and ask him about the tragic passing of Tolja Kovalenko, Boris's victim and colleague at a nearby university. However, Tolja's body was not found, and the case remains a mystery. Many people believe that Boris took him inside the tunnel and ate him, along with dozens of others who went missing around the village. The employer denies the allegations. Before they can interview Boris himself, Valerie tells them that Boris needs more money. Ethan worries that they do not have enough left, but Ryan assures him they can make it work. After settling the dispute, Valerie says they can now talk to Boris, but only one can go, and asserts that there will be no filming in the meantime. The camera, however, continues to roll while they approach Boris. Valerie introduces the crew to Boris and explains that the price has been agreed to, but he will receive it after filming. Boris agrees and hands over the keys to his house, where they will conduct the interview. He then tells them he will be there soon. Eventually, the crew begin filming, also getting acquainted with Inna, whom they discover is referred to as a local witch during their conversation. She is a psychic and clairvoyant who possesses knowledge about the malevolent forces responsible for the bloodshed during the famines, and will also accompany them to help converse with the locals, who might be afraid of strangers. The group proceed by car and embark on a walk through the forest, until they find the house where the tunnel containing the victims' bodies is said to be located. The crew hope to find out more about what really happened in the tunnels. Did Boris actually send his colleague to his demise, if he claims that he was forced to eat the remains? That is what the crew hope to answer during the interview. When they enter the house, the crew start investigating. Ryan notices the attic and climbs up the stairs to check. As he pans the camera, he catches the sight of a pair of boots standing upright near the entrance. He nearly faints in shock, thinking that someone is up there. Upon much closer inspection, they deem the house normal, and they even capture cheerful moments on camera before sunset. They start setting up their main cameras, backup cameras, and lights for the interview. As dusk approaches, the crew begin to grow weary when Boris still hasn't arrived. Valerie has tried to get a hold of him, to no avail, forcing the crew to stay for the night in the house. Ryan is the one who initially suggests sleeping there. Inna is clearly upset and expresses her objection to staying in the house. The crew are unaware of this, as Katerina and Valerie assure them that everything's fine. As the night progresses, they find some joy in their surroundings, sharing food, bread, and alcohol, and engaging in conversations about malevolent spirits. They insist on performing a ritual to invoke the spirits, with the help of Inna, and prepare the table, the same table Boris and his colleague employed to invoke spirits. Under the tablecloth, the wooden surface is revealed to show inscriptions that can summon spirits. However, Inna refuses to help them, saying it's not the right time to do such a thing. This leads them to dance and sing instead, as their bodies begin to fall under the influence of alcohol. Since Boris is not present, the crew decide to invoke Tolja's spirit using the inscriptions on the table and a glass for their amusement. They start asking weird questions. Ethan also flirts with Katerina during the invocation dedicated to mocking Tolja's spirit. Unbeknownst to them, their reckless act summons the ghost of Andrei Chikatilo instead, a notorious serial murderer and cannibal who terrorized the region in more recent times. This triggers a torrent of supernatural chaos that is about to unfold. The next morning, Ryan wakes up first and starts walking inside the house with a camera, waking everyone up, including Ethan, who has slept with Katerina. Ryan then comes across Inna, who tells them that Valerie is not coming back because he's already lost his life. She warns them about the lurking paranormal entity who took Valerie as vengeance for the atrocities they committed last night. She explains the need to recall the spirit, otherwise they cannot leave the house. In addition to that, No one is also allowed to flip over the glass on the table, or they will all pay for the consequences with their lives. However, due to their skepticism and youthful recklessness, the crew dismiss her warnings as mere superstition, leading to conflicts and disagreements among them. Ryan even insults her, dismissing her claims while trying to touch the glass until she mentions his elder brother, whom she should have no idea about. He finally settles down and agrees not to touch it. The crew then discuss the way they can leave the place, and become upset with a man who has offered to pick them up for an insane amount of $800. Katerina suggests calling her friend, Sasha, to help them, to which everyone delightfully agrees. Unbeknownst to them, a cat inside the house is being terrorized by an unknown force invisible to the camera. Back to the crew outside, Katerina informs them that their lift will not make it until the next day, so they have no choice but to spend another night inside the house. To compensate for the loss of their prospect and the man responsible for their transport, Ryan suggests they interview Inna instead. While interviewing Inna, Katerina explains their need for information about the Kiev murders, cannibalism, or any spiritual aspects related to it. The interview reveals that the crew must get rid of the spirit in order to get out of the house. Jenny, however, remains skeptical of Inna's claims and asks her to prove it. Inna then reveals she knows that Jenny cannot conceive a child, and that she doesn't want anyone to know about it. Jenny is completely taken aback and immediately cuts the interview. In a conversation with Ethan, Jenny explains that she recently learned about it and insists on not revealing it to Ryan. She asks Ethan to delete the footage, to which he agrees. Ryan later arrives and asks about how the interview went since the footage from earlier was deleted. Jenny dismisses his concern. As they contemplate on whether they should continue the interview, Ethan calls them from the other room to show them something. Somebody took the camera to shoot inside the attic last night. Ryan insists he didn't film anything last night. Or maybe he just cannot remember anything. The person holding the camera slowly walks deeper into the attic, until the camera focuses on something inside a box. Ryan's curiosity gets the better of him, and he decides to venture into the attic alone, despite the other's objection. When he steps into the attic, he discovers that the boots and the jacket from the other day are missing. He investigates deeper into the pitch-black room, with nothing but a small flashlight lighting his way. Not far from the entrance, the same box from the footage last night can be seen, but this time, its lid is fully closed. Before he can attempt to open the box, a noise startles him, prompting him to inspect the room. Ryan remains collected, despite the unwelcomed noises, proving his skepticism of the supernatural. He then grabs the lid and slowly lifts it, expecting to see the case from the footage. However, he is greeted by the same black cat caught on camera the other day. All of a sudden, the cat vanishes into thin air. This leads Ryan to call for Ethan and tell him to check the footage from the other night during their first seance. In the footage, the crew discovered that an argument between Inna and Valerie led Valerie to leave the house. Inna tried to stop him, but Valerie insisted, which forced her to curse him. What's confusing is that the crew cannot remember any of the arguments which happened that night. They initially put the blame on Valerie, who was in charge of the alcohol, suspecting that he put it in their drinks. Ryan begins to doubt Katerina and Inna, to divert the blame and stay firm on his belief that supernaturals are just mere tales. However, moments later, he immediately apologizes for his actions, justifying it as a reason to find out what's going on. The crew then watch another piece of footage from last night, where they discover that the glass was moving on its own, not to mention that both of their camera's feeds were cut off at the same time. However, they still dismiss the presence of a ghost and deem it as something they find strange, as the others start to feel very uneasy. And in danger of having these bizarre happenings inside the house, Ryan's mind is still fogged by his desperation to finish the documentary. He insists on relying on Inna to go home with something proper for their documentary. He then instructs Ethan to install the other cameras in the rooms, to look for the answers that have been bothering them individually. Jenny, who is desperate for a safe and secure environment, tells Ryan that they will only be spying on themselves instead, despite everything that is happening to them. And especially to the house, Ryan remains optimistic and promises Jenny that everything's going to be okay. To begin another segment of their story, Ryan goes outside to film the house amidst the dark, while having a monologue about the tragic history of the house. Ryan's monologue reveals that right after the famine, a little boy was devoured inside the house, and Boris allegedly brutally slaughtered and ate his colleague Talja there a few years ago. Ryan adds that Boris and Talja invoked spirits using the same table they played with the previous night. Boris is the only person who knows what really happened the night Talja was murdered, and he promised to tell them everything, but he failed to show up. Without Boris, they have decided to perform the invocation themselves to see if they can make anything out of it. Shortly, Ryan returns to the house, informing the distressed Jenny that it has gotten too dark outside. He softly asks Jenny if she is ready to do another invocation with the others. Jenny slightly nods, but the horrified look on her face is overflowing. They proceed to the kitchen. Everything is almost prepared, including the crew. However, their faces tell them otherwise, because they never know what will happen next. A few minutes later, they begin the seance. To further put her belief to the test, Jennifer moves the glass, but Inna can tell that she's doing it anyway. Inna warns her not to do anything to block the spirit from connecting with them. With a short incantation, Inna gently asks if there is any spirit present within the house, the typical way of doing this type of seance. She advises Ethan to touch Katerina's shoulder for safety purposes during the invocation. The spirit will connect if all of them are involved. A few moments later, the glass shockingly begins to move, indicating that the spirit is there. Ryan freely states that he wants to speak with him and asks if he can ask the spirit a question. The movement of the glass to yes confirms his question. All of a sudden, the generator unexpectedly shuts down and the lights go out at the same time. In the darkness, the glass continues to slide on the table, instilling fear and panic in them. Ryan tells Ethan to grab the camera and switch on the light to figure out what is going on. As the camera lights up the table, Inna confirms what the spirit says to dig in the middle of the barn. The crew have no understanding of what that entails. Refusing to believe that the strange events happening inside the house are caused by a spirit, Ryan insists on going outside to check the generator, and Ethan immediately follows him, despite his protests to stay inside the house. Ethan, who's afraid that something might happen outside in the dark, shakily holds the camera while guiding Ryan. Suddenly, Ethan hears a strange noise. He shines the flashlight outside, trying to figure out where it came from. He is taken aback when something attacks him, causing him to stumble on the ground. Ryan immediately rushes to his aid and assures him there is nothing in there. Later, Jenny joins Ryan and Ethan as they begin digging in the barn. Jenny refuses to believe in Inna, berating the two for believing what Inna says. However, to their surprise, they discover the missing case with images, an old camera, and recordings. Ethan plays footage of Boris captured by his deceased colleague, Talja. The footage was captured in 1995 inside the same house, just before Boris was arrested for cannibalism. In the beginning of the video, Boris is shown distressed, with Talja telling him to do what the spirit wants so they can survive. Boris clutches his head as he begins to act strange. The video stuns them, as Boris suddenly slashes his chest with his bare hands and then rips off flesh from it. Behind the camera, Talja sounds terrified and worried, but his once comforting voice is replaced with screams of complete terror as Boris starts attacking him. The camera lands on the floor as Boris devours Talja alive, which proves that the rumors about him are true. Suddenly, the same black cat passes through the view of the camera, screeching, the same noise Ethan heard from outside. The generator shuts off once more. Ryan insists on taking a look at it again, but the others think it's too risky. However, Ryan refuses to listen, as he still believes that a real person is just messing with them. Before they can go out, they realize that the generator is still running, but it doesn't explain why the lights are off. This just fuels Ryan's need to check who's behind this, as they discover that the generator was intentionally unplugged. They begin hearing strange noises again. Ryan goes after it, while Ethan is obviously terrified and just wants to go back inside. They reach another barn, and when they are about to investigate inside, a cat latches onto Ethan's arm, causing him to panic. Just then, they hear Jenny calling out to Ryan. As they return to the house, they find the same cat brutally murdered in the bed. If they were in the right state of mind, they would immediately realize that it would be impossible for the cat to attack Ethan, then seconds later get mauled to its demise inside the house. But no, they are consumed by their pride, refusing to admit to themselves that they are against a malevolent force. Anger, fear, and frustration begin to consume the mood inside the house. Ryan insists that everything was fake and that Boris has set it up to make fun of them. Later that morning, Jenny claims that Ryan scratched her that evening. Ryan, on the other hand, has no idea where Jenny is coming from. Katerina also explains that Ethan did the same thing to her, but everyone has no recollection of what happened. They decide to check the camera to see what occurred that night. To their confusion, Ryan and Ethan did it. Fear and desperation grip the crew as they struggle to comprehend what exactly is going on. Jenny begins to panic and wants to leave immediately, but Katerina says they can't go unless they summon the spirits. Jenny leaves, and Ryan goes after her. Meanwhile, a quick browse from the internet reveals that the man in the old photographs is Andrei Chikatilo, the serial murderer. Suddenly, they hear Ryan calling out to them. They begin venturing into the woods and find Valerie's car. That crashed onto a tree, but Valerie is nowhere to be found. They start blaming Inna for what happened to Valerie, due to their argument before Valerie left. Inna asserts her innocence, saying that the spirit is to blame, but they refuse to listen. They begin moving through these old woods, but Jenny and Katerina cannot continue due to the pain caused by their scratches. Ryan volunteers to go alone, but he starts to feel sick as he gets farther from the house. They have no choice but to return before it gets dark. Inna then leaves to check the woods, while they continue searching for some facts about Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo. It is revealed that Chikatilo has murdered more than 50 people of all ages. After taking the lives of his victims by stabbing them repeatedly, Chikatilo is said to dine on their genitals, ripping their flesh with his teeth. Though he pleaded insanity, Chikatilo was eventually executed in 1994. Chikatilo's experience from childhood is believed to be the cause for his insanity. His brother, Stepan, was murdered and eaten. A further search of the victims' photographs reveals that they possess the same scratches present on Jenny and Katerina's body. Not long after, Inna returns to the house and explains that the house sits in the middle of the pentagram, which means that they stay protected as long as they are inside. However, since Chikatilo has eaten people, his spirit is only becoming stronger at this point. Inna provides Katerina, Ethan, and Jenny some ointment to protect them from the spirit. It is said that Chikatilo uses the wounds to possess the victim. Inna believes that Chikatilo's spirit is still there in the house, seeking vengeance for the loss of his brother. They believe that Chikatilo will let them go, just like how he allowed Boris to survive. To ask for their freedom, the crew once again try to call Chikatilo's spirit. As the lights go out one by one, Inna desperately attempts to banish Chikatilo's presence. However, her efforts prove futile, plunging the crew into an even more nightmarish battle for survival. As they struggle to turn the light back on, they realize that Inna was already in the other room. Katerina approaches her, but she's not responding to her questions. As the tension rises, Inna attacks her, screaming, and begins saying strange things, like talking to a baby who was never even born. She also orders them to dig 5 meters in front of the Northern Cross. They soon realize that she is possessed by the spirit already. The once skeptical minds of the crew are now jolted into the horrifying reality of their situation. Their skepticism and recklessness have led them to this dire situation, and now they must face the consequences of their actions. The crew are left with no choice but to cater to Chikatilo's demands, hoping he will let them go. In the darkness of the night, the crew step outside in search of the Northern Cross, which they soon find on a tree. They begin digging, and soon come across an entrance to the tunnels. Inside, they find bones that look like they belong to a young boy, who they believe was Stepan. They believe that Chikatilo wants them to take the bones back to the house and give them a proper burial. Everyone agrees, except Ryan, who still demonstrates his lack of understanding of the supernatural by wanting to refuse its demands. In the end, Ryan proves that he only believes in himself, leading to a narrative that Chikatilo should take him first, which is confirmed when Jenny pushes him into the hole, breaking his leg. Ryan almost cries in pain, but still finds the words to tell Ethan to follow Jenny, who deliberately ran into the woods. Ethan leaves, and Katerina stays. With his ragged breathing, Ethan refuses to stop running until he catches up with Jenny, who suddenly passes out. When she regains consciousness, she has no recollection of what she did to Ryan. Her guilt and worry for her boyfriend instantly consume her, and they both return to meet with Ryan and Katerina. However, they find no hole nor any presence of the two. They start digging, but they eventually feel weary, forcing them to go back to the house. Still haunted by guilt, Jenny reveals that it was she whom Inna was talking about earlier. She had an abortion years ago, and believes that Chikatilo is now punishing her for it. Ethan tries his best to comfort her. On their way to the house, Jenny feels someone touch her, and a faint raspy voice of a man can be heard in the background. When they return to the house, they find Ryan's camera on the table. Jenny frantically searches the house for Ryan, and tries waking Inna, to no avail. They decide to check the footage, and they discover that Katerina and Ryan fell into the deeper part of the tunnel. When Ryan recovers, he discovers that Katerina is no longer with him. Despite his broken leg, Ryan ventures into the tunnel as he hears Katerina crying from a distance. He desperately calls for her when someone suddenly stabs him. The footage is then cut to Jenny, storming out of the room to find Ryan and Katerina. Ethan stops her and locks the door, saying that they need to invoke Chikatilo again to do what he wants. However, before they can even begin, the glass moves on its own. Chikatilo wants them to eat Inna. Ethan is consumed by anger and starts cursing Chikatilo, before turning his attention to Inna. He tries using the rosary on her, hoping to get rid of Chikatilo, but his efforts are fruitless. In a desperate fight for survival, Ethan orders Jenny to go with him and leave the house. Their heavy steps are almost like an orchestra of fear and determination to escape. Against exhaustion and burning lungs, they try to go as far as possible from the house. With each step, Ethan urges Jenny to continue, despite the pain from her bleeding wound. All of a sudden, Jenny hears a strange noise, and the next thing she sees is a strange figure going after them. As Ethan tells her to keep going, Jenny watches him being pulled into the woods by an unknown force. She calls for Ethan, dreading to know where he was taken. As she crumples to the ground, giving into the horrors of everyone's disappearance, the same malevolent force drags her along the woods and into the tunnels. In the depths of the tunnel, Jenny searches for her friends amidst the suffocating darkness. Every step she takes draws her closer to the truth. Fueled by determination and forced by fear, she continues running until she sees Ethan's hand waving from around the corner, while he desperately calls for help. But before she can help him, Ethan is pulled away again by the same mysterious force, and that is the last she sees of him. After what feels like forever, Jenny comes upon Katerina, who's now chained to the walls of the tunnel, looking completely disheveled. Katerina reveals that someone possessed by Chikatilo was there, eating people, to make Chikatilo's spirit stronger. She also reveals that she is being forced to eat to allow Chikatilo passage back to the world, to be reborn. Jenny cannot understand what Katerina means, and continues to ask questions until she is attacked by the deranged Boris, who proceeds to brutally murder her after learning that she's infertile. Chikatilo plans to be reborn by having a woman conceive his child, the very reason why he spared Katerina's life. Due to the crew's recklessness, the village is in danger again from the same man who terrorized it decades ago.